Assalamu alaikum. Today, inshallah, we will be starting a new text, the 27th word. And inshallah, we can read it together and think about it together and reflect together and see what it may have to offer to us, inshallah. So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The 27th word, treatise on independent judgments of the law, ijtihad. 5 or 6 years ago, in an Arabic treatise, I wrote concerning a matter to do with independent judgments on points of the Sharia. Now, at the request of 2 of my brothers, this word was written about that matter in order to put in his place someone who had overstepped the mark in his attacks on it. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. If they had only referred it to the prophets or to those charged with authority among them, the proper investigators would have tested it from them direct. And this is from chapter 4, verse 83. Yeah, it's an interesting verse. If they had only referred it to the prophet or to those charged with authority among them, the proper investigators would have tested it from them direct. So I suppose this is the verse that he will be, in one way or another, elucidating upon the meaning that he was able to extract from it on this topic of ijtihad. The door of independent judgments on the law is open, but at the present time, there are 6 obstacles to entering it. The first, in winter, when the storms are fierce, even small holes are blocked up, and it is in no way reasonable to open up new doors. Under the onslaught of a mighty flood, to make openings in the wall in order to repair it leads to being drowned. In just the same way, at this time of denial and the assault of the customs of Europe and the legion of innovations and the destruction of misguidance, to open up new doors in the citadel of Islam in the name of ijtihad, and make openings that will be the means of those bent on destruction, scaling the walls and entering it, is a crime against Islam. I think, I'll just have a very brief comment, even though I'll continue reading here, but it's a very useful analogy that he's providing here, right? That if the risk of this larger onslaught, of this larger destruction outweighs any potential repairs or benefits, then you have to prevent that which might bring about that destruction. And in this sense, this is what he means perhaps by saying that there is an obstacle to the door of ijtihad right now. But let me just continue for a little bit more. The second, independent judgments may not be made about the essential teachings of religion, for they are specified and definite. Moreover, they are like basic food and sustenance. Although at this time all effort and endeavor should be expended on their being upheld and raised to life, they, the essential teachings of religion, they are being abandoned and degraded. So to give them up, despite their being among the theoretical matters of Islam, and due to them being the pure and sincere interpretations of the first generations of Islam are not inadequate for the needs of all times, and to make new interpretations of the law in arbitrary fashion is an innovation and betrayal of Islam. Before I continue with the third, so here we have sort of two obstacles that he is presenting about why, although the door of ijtihad or making independent judgments on the law may be open, it should not be opened, or it should not be attempted at this time, right? This is a interesting, I guess, topic, and one that, as he says in the sort of very introduction, might be specifically addressed to someone who is trying to attack this topic of ijtihad or raise it as a necessity. And I'm also thinking about, is this a topic of just theoretical matters? Is this a topic that pertains to my life? And it could very well be that it is a sort of very specific matter in certain scholarship, while still being able to have some relevance. I mean, either way, it doesn't negate the value that it might hold. But any comments, any questions at this point about these first two obstacles that the author is noting? Brother Birkan, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Maybe we should start with the idea of ijtihad, making a new interpretation of, let's say, the law as decreed by the revelation and sunnah, based on the necessities and the needs of the time, specific circumstances, and some specific the conditions that someone or a group of people are in. This is ijtihad, right? What we understand from the ijtihad. So there are certain things that we know being right or wrong, being harmful or the fruitful, beneficial for us. But there are certain things that we don't know about. For instance, we ask questions whether it is permissible to spend all your day using Facebook, let's say. So obviously there is no such a discussion in previous nations, let's say, going back to Prophet.
No one uses Facebook anymore. Let's say Instagram.
Okay, Instagram.
Make it relevant.
I apologize. So Instagram. So anyway, like there's a new situation that arises in this time or in your life, and you wonder what to do there. Or even if it is something common that that the thing is the same. So for instance, buying a house, let's say, or buying a shelter to protect you and your family. But again, the circumstances are different. So you wonder whether you could use money that has some, what is the word for faiz, riba?
Interest.
Interest. So yes, can you use the interest money to, buy, let's say, a shelter for yourself? So these are all practical examples, but as a concept, maybe, as a general concept, ijtihad is all about making an interpretation of the, of the teachings of the Prophet and the revelation based on your needs. And we know that the Prophet used to do that. So Prophet used to say one thing to one person and then another thing to another person based on their needs, their level of understanding, what would be most beneficial for them. Based on all these criteria, the Prophet used to do ijtihad. And the same way, the people, the companions, and their followers also did a lot of ijtihad, making interpretations, showing us that in Islam, in Quranic teaching, things are flexible. They should be adapted to the certain circumstances and certain needs. So this is what I understand from ijtihad. And when it comes to today, I guess it is obvious that we are living in a, society among, let's say, believers, where making ijtihad, new interpretations, is both maybe necessary, but at the same time has a high demand. So we all talk about the changing circumstances, changing time, changing needs. We always say, we are different type of humankind. Everything is different about us. So we should reinterpret everything about the religion. So ijtihad is very, I guess, at the center stage of our religious life today. An author says the ijtihad is always open. The door to ijtihad is open. You cannot, close it because it was there from the beginning. The interpretation, making sense of things based on different needs, adapting them, was a part of the sunnah of Prophet. So you cannot just say that the door is closed, there is no more ijtihad, every interpretation possible done. You cannot say that, but at the same time, there are certain obstacles before that, he says. And the word obstacles, I guess, chosen very carefully. It's like, you can do that if it is necessary, but you should be aware that, there are some difficulties doing so. So sometimes it is even better not doing it in order to not to cause a bigger trouble for yourself. And then he starts explaining these difficulties. The first, which is, I guess, really important, it says, you are under attack of certain the ideologies, certain understandings, the ideas, and you should spend more time to, you can take it different ways, but you can take it as, to fight them, or maybe to understand them, or maybe to, know how to, sorry, how to live among them. So you should spend your effort together with second and the first. You should spend more effort to survive among all these, amid all these attacks. That should be your priority. And the example it gives, like if you have let's say a wall and you want to repair it, so that's also interesting, right? He's talking about the repairing a wall. So it obviously it requires some repairing. Yes, then you should repair the wall. But know that there's a time for it. So, for instance, you wouldn't repair the wall of your house during the winter time, because then it would cause a bigger trouble, right? You would have cold weather coming inside, and if it is especially like the old style house, if you open like it's not an apartment in the building, then if you open a hole, you can even be drowned, right? If there's a flood or anything. So it is dangerous. It is like, it's not feasible. It is stupid, if I can say, I apologize, to trying to repair a wall during a winter time, unless it is, required for your survival, let's say. So it is much better to wait until the summertime. Even the wall requires some repairment. Just, take it easy, try to live with it, wait for the summertime, and then you will repair. So the author is not against a repair, but saying that, a reasonable person would know when to make the repair and when not to make the repair. And to me, at least, this makes perfect sense. We should now, I guess, study why he thinks that, his time was not suitable for it. We should also discuss whether our time is suitable for it or not, or whether, what kind of ijtihad should be done, or what kind of ijtihad should be, shouldn't be done, at least in our, very specific cases. Jazakallah.
Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction to the topic and for situating our minds onto the issue at hand as well. Yeah, before I continue, any other comments or questions that anyone has, given the sort of contextualization, mental situation that Brother Rikan has provided as well? Brother Yusuf, go ahead.
So, Assalamu alaikum. I hope it's not going to be controversial or anything, but just as this came as an example to my mind as we were discussing about it recently. So, for instance, a question maybe nobody would have questioned in the past centuries. Today, we can say that why is it that in the prayer, a male is being imam? Let's make a female as imam. And now we are this was coming from a society which is man dominant. And in this day and age, we are now trying to undo this. And and there seems to be no rule explicitly saying who is going to lead the prayer and whatnot in the scripture. So let's try to see if there's nothing wrong with females doing it. At the end of the day, it is about you getting closer to your creator and whatnot. So this is I guess, nice example, or at least a practical example from today, which we were discussing with someone yesterday, pertaining to some major, or I don't know if it's major, but about the prayer, how prayer is performed within a group. And today, this is a problem. So the author, as if saying that putting a question mark over there, is it the time to put a question mark over there in this day and age? This is what I understand from saying that the door is open, but there are obstacles to enter there. As if the author is saying that question the question mark in there, rather than saying, okay, let's discuss. I mean, we can, of course, discuss anything, so let's discuss about it. But as if the author is saying that let's discuss this, putting a question mark there today.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Yeah, all of this is very useful in thinking about this topic of ijtihad and what it means in our contemporary context as well, right? So one example that Brother Yusuf gave was of how there are certain ideologies, let's say ideologies regarding gender or otherwise, that and it doesn't have to be just about gender, but just contemporary ideologies that do shape and shift the way in which we might see something acceptable or permissible or good. And so perhaps, in this first obstacle that Nursi is saying, when he says, at this time of denial and the assault of the customs of Europe and the legions of innovations and the destruction of misguidance, is that applicable to our time, right? I don't think there's been a decrease in denial, probably exponentially increase in denial. And, Europe here is just a placeholder for just any of the, again, contemporary ideologies that we have that are coming from a sort of not creator-centric framework, but usually self-centric framework, right? In which the self is platformed, in which the self is given the sort of pinnacle of spotlight on how things should be. And alongside that, we have, other materialistic or naturalistic, just things that inform our sense of existence in the world, and so on, and like how we make practical decisions, whether it's about mortgages or credit cards or anything else. So the question here is a very practical question, which is when I am trying to live my life within this sort of specific environment, and that environment can be a very specific social, cultural, political environment that is localized through certain policies, certain ideologies, right, that are very rampant in both, in any setting that is usually seen as a setting of education or progress. Let's say it's a setting that most of us are familiar with here, which is a setting of universities and colleges. And so how do we go about in making practical decisions about our life when we are operating in a society that is not guided by the principles of the Quran, by the principles of by the principles of Quran, and again by a creator-centric framework? And I guess that's the question here. Is it about opening or closing the door of ijtihad, or is it about what kind of situation do I find myself in, and what is the best way to proceed such that I can still hold on to Quranic principles. I can still hold on to prophetic practices when I am trying to live my life in a way that brings me fulfillment and contentment and a dynamic relationship with my creator, where I am conscious of him in my day-to-day life, and also my financial dealings, my personal interrelational dealings, my political dealings, and so on. So I'll just call the names in order that I saw them. Brother Birkan, you can go ahead, and then Sohail, please go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan. So maybe one point, and I need help from others as well, because I can't be sure. But I think what is meant here is with the ijtihad, independent judgment on the law, is when there is let's say a judgment on how to do or whether to do or not to do about something. So there is a judgment there, but you want to change it based on changing circumstances and the needs. So the reason I'm saying that, because like there is no escape from making the interpretation, adaptation of the revelation to your life. You have to do it constantly. So this text is not about, not implementing revelation into your life. So we shouldn't confuse things. Like, for instance, if there's a unique, the circumstances or unique thing arise, that a new technology, in your life, and there was no, the example of it in previous nations, let's say, and you have to make an interpretation anyway. Or every moment of your life is a kind of unique, and to the extent that it is unique, you have to make the interpretation. There's no escape from that. But I guess what is meant here with the ijtihad is that you are in a situation and you know what prophet decided about it already, or what the companions of the prophet, their followers, decided to do or not to do, or recommended to do, what to do or what not to do. You already know the answer, but you still want to change it because you think, it should change. It doesn't need to be a, bad intention. So at least at the beginning, he doesn't talk about, bad intentions. So this is, I guess, what is studied here. So for instance, the Yusuf's example, or whether a female can lead the, the prayer or not, is a good example for the text. Because we already know the answer right now, that, it's a male imam should lead the prayer. This is how we learned, let's say. But then the question, one day, Yusuf comes and say that, Birkan, do you know what? The circumstances are changed. So although we know the answer, maybe we should change it. And I say, why? He explains for this reason, that reason, and so on. And then we say, okay, let's have a female imam or not. So I guess this is a good example. Otherwise, again, if it's a very unique circumstances, that you have to make an interpretation anyway. There's no escape from it. So the text is not against, let's say, interpretation, or these obstacles that author is talking about is not before interpreting the revelation. You have to do it. But these obstacles are before making a new interpretation of the same situation, let's say, or a similar situation, or a situation that you can make a parallel. And in the second one, he explicitly says that the interpretations of the previous nations or the first generations, let's say, they're already encompassing enough that if you look there, you will probably find your answer. So instead of looking at your mind first or your own judgment first, look at there. If you don't find an answer there, then try to come up with the answer. But otherwise, if you already have an answer there and you are still trying to change it, the door is open, but there are some obstacles before that. So this is how I understand the text.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Sohail, you can just go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Just to add on to others have said, yeah, I kind of like, especially the modern phenomenon, like I see it probably more so than other people here in this room. Like, for example, like LGBTQ phenomenon and people wanting to change their genders, things like that. I see it firsthand. And obviously, just to be frank, these are just like modern issues, or as Yusuf brought up, women leading prayer in a mixed gathering. Come across, hey, do I even need to fast in Ramadan the full day? How about, doesn't it just count if I just do it to the midday? How about if I drink some water? Or how about just praying in my heart? Is that sufficient? Things like this. Nursi brings up an example. I don't know if this is in the section where he says, why can't we just make the adhan by with a gun, like just calling, like essentially like a bell or a gun, and telling people, oh, it's prayer time, without calling the adhan. And to me, I think, and this is a bit controversial, like in the modern day, is that primarily, as he says, you can't make a judgment if your worldview is predicated upon denial. And even if somebody says they believe, like I used to think, like, sort of, again, this may be controversial, but I used to think that, somebody who makes ijtihad, they must go through years of scholarship and et cetera, and, be trained at these like big institutions. And I realized later in life, I said, it's all, to me, nonsense, because fundamentally, these people are also sort of indoctrinated with a secular worldview. You can call yourself Muslim, it's sort of irrelevant to me. We all are sort of indoctrinated by it and sort of shaped by it. And that's why you get these quote unquote people who are scholars making these sort of interesting judgments about life. They have like no basis in reality. And I think that's the issue, is that denial is so prevalent. Like, you have to ask yourself, like, to me, anybody can make ijtihad. I don't think you have to be somebody special, per se. It's like, what is your perception of the world? Like, and it's not just like, oh, I believe. Like, is that truly how you see the world? And are you basing that judgment off of that? Because, for example, like to use the issue of, and I emphasize like perception of the world, because one's perception of the world is based off of reason. And the issue today is that, and it's not just how I feel, but how I feel coupled with how I reason with how I feel. And today, these issues that I just mentioned, there's no reason involved. It's all purely predicated on how I feel. There's no rational basis necessarily for anything. For example, should I do this X, Y, or Z? It's just predicated upon my whims, my like sort of egoistic whims. And there's no entry or no guidance by reason, which belief fundamentally entails is that you need to employ reason to come to sort of sound conclusion. While how I feel drives my need to reason with the world, I want to make sense of the world. That's a purely an emotional response to my experience of the world. I need reason to guide my judgment, my conclusion. And the problem today is that in denial fundamentally is not rational. There's no reason behind it. Nobody can say I'm being rational when I deny. It's irrational, fundamentally irrational. It's not even a misuse of reason. It's like the absence of reason. And so if my worldview is predicated upon denial, even if I say I believe, then fundamentally I'm not actually reasoning from a sound place. And where he says also that in the second he says independence may not be made about the essential teachings of religion, for they are specified and definite. And I think that touches also is that how I feel like vacillates. It's so labile. I can feel one thing a certain second, and another a completely different way another second. Like in one moment I can say I like this person, in another moment I can despise this person. It's a very labile human emotion, and it's not a bad thing necessarily, but because it is labile, you can't put a definite boundary around it. You can't specify it. It's impossible to specify human emotion, whereas you can with reason. And the issue is when you talk about these matters devoid of using specified and definite terms, because that's what belief is fundamentally. The fundamental matters of belief are very specified and definite. How I experience that is personal, how I utilize that is personal, how I perceive the world is personal, but nonetheless, it's definite because the world is definite in that sense. Like my experience of the world is definite. The world out there is definite. It's apparently controversial to say. Like I have this conversation with people at work. It's like, for example, like, transgenders, notions today. Like the idea that, I can feel a certain way. I can feel I'm a boy, biologically a boy, but I feel like I'm a girl. That's fine. I mean, nobody's discounting how one feels, but it's reasonably obvious that a boy is a boy, a girl is a girl. It's an incontrovertible matter of reality, because that's what belief is. Belief is the perception of the incontrovertible matter of reality. I mean, you can't deny it. It's irrelevant how I feel about it. And I think that to me is where the issue lies. So to make ijtihad like that, like one needs to ask the question, like, from what's my basis? And like to Birkan's point, like, how can one reasonably say that, let's say the prophets and the companions spoke about a matter that is applicable to my life experience today? I'm not saying everything is, but generally speaking, the principles are maybe. Then how can I not look at that and say, oh, okay, let me think about that. Let me see how it applies to my life today, rather than saying I need to completely overturn everything. Because as I think it was Birkan said, I mean, people like to think that they're so different from 1,000 years ago. Like I always find it fascinating in science that people today, it's the human arrogance is so great, and hubris is so great that like people like to think, oh, we're so intelligent or so sophisticated compared to people, desert Bedouins or desert Arabs. I mean, as if human beings couldn't reason 1,000 years ago. No, I mean, just because people have constructed and as a result destroyed the world by constructing such lofty sort of enterprises, they think they sort of have some sort of intellectual prowess and control over the world compared to their ancestors. Whereas the Quran really points that out, is that, like, people need to look to their ancestors. What happened to them? What are the ends of them? And this idea that I know better than the past. Well, no one. You only know, and truthfully, I only know as much as the people before me. Like I wouldn't know anything about the world if it weren't for the prophets. And fundamentally, the prophets are historical in the sense of that they existed in the past. I'm not saying their message is historical, but as human beings, they're historical. They're from the past. I can't meet them physically, but yet what they say is ahistorical. And so I'm shaped by that. Even people in science are shaped by the past. Sorry, I'm outside in a park, but I'm shaped by the past, as are people in everyday life are shaped by the past. My everyday life, I'm in a park right now, and I'm shaped by the people who built this park or built the society around me. So this idea that somehow people in the past didn't know or didn't understand things is completely ridiculous. Rather, they need to be examined by the soundness of their reason, because that's what ijtihad fundamentally employs, is that you need to make sense of things in a reasonable way. while keeping one's human emotion within check. So that's what I wanted to add. Sorry for that long sort of thought.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for adding to this fruitful conversation, inshallah. Any other comments? Anyone? If not, I'm going to just pick it up from the second and read it again. But we have another hand by Brother Rikan, so he can go ahead.
Oh, I actually thought that you would continue from 3, but I wanted to talk about the second. So that's the reason I raised my hand. But if you are about to reread the second, let's listen it and then I can talk.
Okay, I'll just reread it real quickly and then you can make your comment. The second, independent judgments may not be made about the essential teachings of religion, for they are specified and definite. Moreover, they are like basic food and sustenance. Although at this time all effort and endeavor should be expended on their being upheld and raised to life, they are being abandoned and degraded. So to give them up, despite their being among the theoretical matters of Islam, and due to being the pure and sincere interpretations of the first generations of Islam, are not inadequate for the needs of all times, and to make new interpretations of the law in arbitrary fashion is an innovation and betrayal of Islam. You can go ahead, Brother Rika.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum again. So now I will make an ijtihad. So the author, the translator, made a decision there, make a translation, and I think it's a, let's say, not a good translation for us, for our time. Hence, I will come up with a new translation, inshallah, for the second. So in the second, he says there are some core concepts of the religion, the essential teachings, and you cannot make ijtihad about them anyway. So, for instance, you cannot talk about that, yeah, Prophet said, La ilaha illallah, but do you know what? You know, we are living in a different world. We should actually say, La ilaha illallah and money. So you cannot say something like that. Or any of the fundamental essential teachings of the religion, you cannot make a, ijtihad, that's for sure. And then he says, moreover, they are like basic food and sustenance, okay? Although at this time, all effort and endeavor should be expended on their being upheld and raised to the life. So this part is not bad as well. So all your effort should go, most of effort, let's say, but in our time, all your effort should go to making them, uphold them or raise them, to, defense them, let's say. But unfortunately, they are being abandoned and degraded. So this is the time that we are living in. That the people, we abandon the fundamental teachings. So we are far from, being concerned about the periphery or the secondary, let's say, teachings. So and then comes the part that I'm not sure about the translation. So to give them up, despite their being among the theoretical matters of Islam. So these theoretical matters of Islam, Nazariyat, he's not talking about the essential teachings of the religion. This is my understanding. He's talking about the parts of the religion that people trying to make ijtihad. So you can make ijtihad only on these Nazari parts, which, depends on the circumstances, depends on the environment needs, and so on. So the part that you can make ijtihad is the ones, the translation says theoretical, but it's probably more like the relative matters. So you can make ijtihad on the relative matters, but the rest part is due to being pure and sincere. I didn't understand this translation at all. What is meant, as far as I understand from the original, what is meant is the part that you can do ijtihad is the nazari, the relative part, maybe. And there is a sincere and very encompassing, exhaustive, let's say, interpretations, ijtihad, from the companions anyway. So what is being done in terms of ijtihad by the first generations, it's already enough for you and adequate for you. Thus, if you still want to make new interpretation in arbitrary fashion, meaning although it is adequate for you, although it is suitable for you, good enough for you, what has been made, all this interpretation, is still trying to make the interpretation in an arbitrary fashion. This is innovation and betrayal of Islam. So again, the last part, again, to the extent I understand from the original, tells us the part that you can make ijtihad is not the fundamental teachings of the Islam. So you shouldn't be worried about them that much anyway, because your most effort should be about learning these fundamental teachings, trying to teach them to others, and make sure that you leave them properly. That should be your the main concern. The ijtihad relates to these nazari, the relative parts, that the parts that not part of the fundamental teachings, and for that part there is enough interpretation that will also save you as well. So you are not left alone. The author is not suggesting that don't care about them, but he says if you want to implement them, if you want to leave them, there is enough, a proper way to do it. Look at the interpretations of the first generations, and that will be enough for you. If you still want to make new interpretations, then you should probably question your intentions there. If it is enough for you, why you are trying to make a new interpretation in an arbitrary fashion? This is just betrayal. I talked a lot, I apologize.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Yusuf.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. Okay. So one thing that I observe here is from the attitude of author, I'm trying to see what the author is doing in here, because this seems to be a practical matter. And we hear a lot about many shuyukh, which is like talking how to respond back to people who are coming up with, let's say, different ijtihad for new things. Author in here is not addressing them individually. And in general, if you look at his general style, he is not busying himself with that, but this doesn't mean that he is ignoring that. But he says, in general, looking at the author's attitude, all his writings are about iman, 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 from beginning to end. He talks about namaz, salat, and everything also. But as it pertains to iman, as it pertains to the belief, like the conviction that you would get for the creator, for the afterlife, for the prophet, for the angels. And now he is talking about these matters which can be constituting a larger portion of many other people out there. Like the conversation are going on top of that. Like if you go to MSA, let's say, or if you go to a masjid, what is the conversation about? Or where do people become more radicalized? There is this one extreme which says everything should be in, everything should be updated. There's another extreme which is now 24/7. The topic of the fight or the endeavor is to push back and say no, 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 and then talking about why you shouldn't be either like listening to music or whatever, just taking all different extremes. The author in here is, even when he is talking about these matters, he's addressing these extremities of trying to open religion to questioning at all scales. He's saying that, what are you doing? The main matter that's going on is Iman is under attack. And what you're talking about is not a matter of priority to be expanded any further. It is a protective thing. The example he gave in the first one was, it is protective to what is inside. But then what are you trying to do with by trying to open up any new doors or trying to make any changes? So whatever was established so far is enough for you. If you are really willing to benefit from that, it's enough for you. And you have something more that is lacking. So focus your attention to there. If you were not lacking anything, I guess the author would say, okay, yeah, go ahead, do whatever you would like to do. If it's a need, it's become a necessity, go ahead with it. But the main point here is, Iman is under attack. You are lacking this Iman. This should be your number one priority. So as if opening up such a conversation or inviting to say, oh, let's interpret it the way I understand it, is, since the author is using these severe language at the end of the paragraphs, it's a destruction to the religion. It's like a, what was the one that he used at the end of the second one? It's like a betrayal to the religion. So the author is saying that this is what it means. It's not, oh, let's be liberal, let's try to open up the religion as if I am trying to understand the religion more. And as Brother Brikan was saying in his closing remarks, the author is making a statement about my intention here, as if questioning my intentions. So author is being judgmental in here, pretty much. Judgmental in the way that, look at what you are doing and what circumstances we are in. The thing that you do in the circumstances means betrayal. It means destruction. It doesn't mean anything else. So in this regard, author is, I would say, acting a little different than what we have used to be seeing him in, because now he is directly addressing a person who is not unbeliever anymore, because the idea he was addressing so far was unbelief. Now he is addressing someone, some ideology, some attitude, which is apparently from within Islam or Muslim community, let me put it this way, not Islam, but from within Muslim community. And he is being very straight and questioning the intentions. So I guess at this moment, I need to ask myself, where am I? And in my interactions when it comes to Islam, and also spreading Islam or da'wah, like inviting people to religion, where am I in that? What is the topic of my conversation? Or where do I start from? Where do I interact with people?
Jazakallah khair. I'm not sure if that's a new hand from Brother Birkan or not.
It's a new hand.
Okay, well, before I let you speak, I just wanted to add a few thoughts. I think here that it's a very needed emphasis, as Brother Yusuf was saying, that our attentions, our emphasis, right, should be on these essential, necessary teachings of religion, of belief matters, right, of iman, when we are constantly bombarded by all of these various attacks that come in different forms, different shapes. What I'm thinking about is that those who may want to engage, let's say, in new interpretations, or say, we need to change how this is done. I mean, the text here says, as both of you highlighted, that the interpretations offered by the first generations of Islam are not inadequate, that they are adequate, right? We don't need the double negative here, that they are adequate for the needs of all times. But I think this is the point that that one might very much so take issue with, because if they are trying to bring in a new interpretation or change how something is done, it's precisely because they don't feel that something is adequate, or that something is fulfilling whatever they might be in need of right now. So the question to ask is, where does that feeling of inadequacy, or where does that feeling of this current interpretation, correct interpretation, not being enough come from? Is it the fact that we are, again, as the first point highlighted, under the onslaught of certain ideas and certain ideologies that are saying, hey, this needs to change, this needs to be done this way? But, you know, like, and I see it on college campuses many times, there are all these students who, you know, their number one concern, at least in terms of what they might be advocating or trying to bring about, you know, no one can obviously access their internal states, but what they might be advocating for does seem like these sort of more matters that would be up to, let's say, ijtihad, right? And so why is it that they feel that the current interpretations are inadequate? What aspect of them is not fulfilling them? And why is that so? Because if one already accepted this statement, that they were adequate, then they wouldn't be engaging in ijtihad or trying to change something in the first place. And oftentimes, I think this comes from many people, many young people as well, many students who are going at it with from a feeling of, you know, wanting some sort of justice or wanting some sort of contentment. Like, it's not sort of out of ill intent, right? As Brother Yusuf was saying, it is coming from people within the Muslim community, and it's not coming from a place of ill content, but at a place of, hey, something doesn't feel right. And so why is that the case? Is I guess the question. And maybe all of that ties eventually back to the fact that those basic pillars of iman are not being emphasized enough. I'm not sure. Those are my 2 cents, but Brother Virkan, you can go ahead and then we can hear Suhail.
Assalamu alaikum. So I like to continue from where Yusuf stopped first, and then maybe touch upon the things that you talked, Ashan. So Yusuf was talking about a small contrast that the author used to talk about, you know, the iman, and maybe have to defend the matters of belief, iman, against the, you know, the external attacks, let's say. The idea of tawheed versus plurality, I cannot pronounce it, sorry. The existence of infinite gods and so on. So here, it seems that the things are a little bit changed, but I think it's not the case much. Like, I don't think the things changed a lot, because he's still talking about defending something, protecting something, and this something is yourself. So from the beginning up until this point, I think the author is trying to protect the human being himself, first and foremost, from inadequate understandings of the reality, the life, the universe, existence, creation. Sometimes these inadequate understandings come from outside. Sometimes they come from inside you, or inside your community. And no matter where these inadequate understandings or intentions originate from, you should be defending your, let's say, true nature. You should be defending that the revelation that you benefit from, against these inadequate understandings and intentions. And here he says, yeah, sometimes they come from inside. And in the first, I guess it's obvious that he's talking about protecting something, repairing something. So ijtihad, the intention for ijtihad should be should be originated from the idea of repairing something, making it stronger, making it, more suitable, let's say, maybe not suitable, but for defended, right? Not to relax something. So it's talking about repairing a wall. The wall having an issue, stability issue, so you should repair it. Otherwise, it will collapse. And what we do instead, the way we approach such, the new interpretations or the matter of ijtihad, is that there is no enough windows in this wall. So I will open some new holes to make some windows. Or the door is not, wide enough. I have a bigger, body, so I should enlarge the door. So this is our attitude, to relax something, to make it, more pleasant to our wishes, our desires. But instead, author says that ijtihad should be done to repair something if there's an issue. Otherwise, why would you do that? So this is the first part. The second part about what Ashanur said, but maybe first I should let Suhail speak, and then if there's time, I can speak again.
Suhail, the mic is yours.
Sorry. So, just to add on to a few points said earlier, I think just my experience is that why this is such an issue is that as he says, and it was touched on earlier, is that belief is not emphasized enough. And by doing so, or not, by not emphasizing it enough and discussing it enough, then people just are, in their mind, are mixed up as to how they see the world. So they're not clear as to how they perceive things or how they understand things. It's not sound, or it's not specified and definite, as he says. And so they're not certain about it. Whether they may admit it or not is irrelevant. It's just the fact that people try to pursue these things is, to me, shows that people aren't certain about what they believe in. And you know, I think that's one thing. And then that plays, I think there's a psychological aspect of, you know, like an inferiority complex, in that because one is not certain, then one is susceptible, especially like, you know, as you like mentioned, you know, college students, or even, I mean, really anybody, but susceptible to the prevailing environment, their peers. What does society say? What is the cultural sort of expectation of how you sort of view things? Because that sort of clouds judgment, because, you know, there's no certainty about what one believes in, regardless if it's against the majority. You know, that's problematic. So while I do agree that, you know, some people who are Muslims may sincerely try to ask these questions, there are honestly and well-known examples of people who do question these things. For example, you know, like, without naming names of anybody, I'm sure has heard that, but like, you know, questioning prophets, um, who people claim to be scholars. I don't consider it scholarship or them to be scholars personally. Quite frankly, it's the fact that it passes as scholarship to me is trash and speaks to the sort of state of Muslims today, or people who call themselves Muslim. But nonetheless, like some people then have a very sort of, they have a destructive, as he says, it becomes destructive. So while it may be innocent at first, and I think some people are innocent about it, you know, if put in the wrong hands or with the wrong intent, it becomes destructive, to the point that then you start questioning, you know, everything. It's not just, oh, can women lead prayer now? Now it's, well, the prophets are sort of, they are substandard human beings. Or is the Quran a historical piece of a historical document? Is it the eternal word of God? Absolutely. Or is it just a historical document? And we just need to ignore some things in the Quran, that things that don't sort of comport, or sort of, they're not agreeable with like modern society. It's a dangerous path. And to the point that people from within Islam, or people who are Muslims, then maybe even become atheists, or just leave Islam altogether. So so you can't, I do agree, you can't address these things by just saying, oh, we will take an attitude where society is wrong. The only way, to me, that you can address this, the only effective way, and really the only reasonable way, is to address belief, or belief matters. Because if you address those, then to me everything else makes sense after that.
Jazakallah khair. I agree with that statement very much so. I think and I think that's what Nursey's trying to emphasize here as well, that those essential matters need to be prioritized, need to be emphasized. Brother Birkan, did you want to say a bit more? It seemed like you wanted to. We have time if you'd like.
Oh, sure, sure. Especially the part that you raised, the questions that you raised, and to, I guess the great extent, Suhail already answered them. But so I think you are right. Like the people, at least the ones who have good intentions, and I'm no one to judge their intentions anyway. So I don't think, by the way, the author is, judging intentions of specific people, or certain groups or anything. It's rather, I guess, judging the intention of the need, or asking for ijtihad coming inside. So otherwise, judging the intention of others, it doesn't make sense. I apologize. But anyway, so like people, yes, having this discomfort we are having this discomfort about the religion and religious matters. This is a fact, especially today. It is a fact that the young generations, including ourselves, we are not that old, the young generations, they are not comfortable with the religion. They don't find it as an answer or even an ultimate answer. Like, forget about the ultimate answer, sorry, even an ordinary answer to their needs. They don't see it. They don't have hopes about the religion. Even for the believers, most of us, most of the times, we believe as a continuation of the culture that we've been raised in. Extension of this culture. Even among the believers, even if they are genuine believers, they still are not comfortable with what they believe. And how it shows itself, how it manifests itself, this discomfort, first and foremost, manifests itself in the matters that are not fundamental. Especially among the believers, circles of believers, we see that the people, again, including ourselves, having some discomfort about certain issues which are not that important in reality. And we discuss them, we want to change them, because what I understand here, and maybe this is my own interpretation, but not because we have a problem with these minute things, but because we have problems with the fundamental teachings of belief or Quran. But this discomfort about the fundamental teachings manifests itself first and foremost as in this matter of the secondary matters. How should I dress? Whether should I listen to music or not? Whether should I treat the opposite sex this way or that way? Should I pray on the left or right? So we do have this discomfort, especially as Suhail said, within this society, partly as a part of, as a consequence of this inferiority complex, we're having these concerns, the conflicts, discomforts, but not because we have a better understanding of these minute things, or not because our circumstances requires us some changes in these matters, but because we have discomfort, because we have problems with the fundamental teachings. So we should spend our times, most of our times, to study these fundamental teachings, to discuss these fundamental teachings, to have a comfort about them, to have a peace about these fundamental teachings. And then I assume that the discomfort about these minute things will resolve themselves. Then I will find myself, probably like speaking to myself, that I don't care much about whether I listen to music or not. And then Yusuf will find himself in a position that I don't care if anybody listens music or not. Like, I don't like to listen to music. If Ayşenur enjoying listening music, that's her problem. That's her choice. I don't want to, spend much time about that in my mind, Yusuf would say. But today, I cannot say that. Today, I have to find a solution, whether I should listen to music or not. And then for Yusuf, he has to find an argument to prevent Ayşenur from listening to music or not. because both of us have issues, just as a matter of example, of course. Both of us has some issues which are more fundamental than listening music. So I guess we should spend more time on these fundamental teachings, and also people who are feeling this discomfort, they should ask themselves whether I have any issue, a discomfort with these fundamental teachings. Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for both of you for those comments. I see that there's a comment. Would you like to read it, Farah? So we have a different voice.
Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, I'm in the middle of things, but I can read. Basically, the point was that I agree that belief needs to be centered, and it always does seem to focus the problem. And it is also belief matters are also something that are personally more to change how, let's say, congregational prayers are conducted in the entire Muslim community. What is more tangible in addressing some sort of discomfort with their tradition or with their belief is matters of belief, which are your own individual, independent, let's say, journey and process. So practically, it makes sense. But the only thing that I wanted to point out was that I'm not sure if this was happening or not, but I just wanted to personally, for myself, make a distinction between matters that, let's say, for example, it was a good example about the question of female leadership in prayer, whether it's a non-essential matter or whether it is just not the right time to bring something up, and it will also encourage discord because people have very strong positions on it. So is it really the right time to have people fight each other and I don't know, like go into futile debates about it when that's really not the problem we need to be concerned with? So personally, I just wanted to understand for myself that maybe some questions we should know that it might not be the best time right now to pursue them, but definitely ask them. And certain questions are just never going to be, are never worth even questioning in the first place, such as, let's say, matter of tawheed or basic matters around prayer, etc., etc.
Jazakallah khair, Farah. Thank you for that. So the question that is raised is, how or should we differentiate between matters that should not be asked right now because they are not essential, right? And that it would only cause discord, versus those that have importance and can be sort of dealt with under the headline of ijtihad at another time, at a time that in which you might not cause discord. So that was not the best rendition of the question, but I think she explained it herself well, and we were able to understand you, but because the audio was cracking a little bit, I'll just read your comment anyway, which says, I do think that though belief always must be the priority, but we can still make a difference between non-negotiable, for example, the authenticity of the Quran, and matters that need to be tabled for later, for example, some concerning community-based practices. So we have a few hands up and we have a few minutes, so please try to keep your responses short or comments short. Brother Yusuf and then Brother Suhail, inshallah.
So there was this comment at some point, like why such attitudes are coming into play. It's not always like ill will, but with maybe some good intentions. So at this moment, actually, I'm questioning myself. When I tend to do such things, I feel like I have good intents. But what is ill will here, really? Like, is it that, because at the end of the day, if I am damaging it, was my intention of, let's say, self-gratification? Is this considered something ill or something okay, for instance? Like, if the desiring factor that makes me want to change something or question something, well, question is not the right word, but willing to change something without knocking the door of the prophets, because this is how the initial verse was, or the ulul amr, like the ones who are given authority on it. I don't want to knock their doors, but I want to find my own way. So if the underlying reason, I'm making a big if over there, if I question myself and find out that actually I am looking for self-gratification, and I am using maybe a religion as an obstacle for that, yet I cannot abandon religion, so I am trying to open up space for myself in here. Would this be considered as an ill will, or would this be considered as, well, just this is a lost soul? He doesn't know what he is doing, and he's just trying to like damaging unintentionally. Would it be considered unintentional or like a goodwill? But of course, there's this other cases which might happen that, let's say, since my childhood, like my local imam or my father had been oppressing me with religion and the rules and regulations of religion. And now that I am like grown up, I want to push back because I am fed up with it. I came to the brink of denying creator for this sort of a presentation. But now that I'm realizing that no, God cannot be denied, it is such a solid truth of this existence, and Quran is truth, yet I have this anger towards the cultural tradition. By culture, I don't mean the prophetic tradition, but somehow I am equating my local imam's problem with the whole prophetic tradition, let's say. And then I'm trying to come up with a new path for myself, which might be the case. So, for example, would this be considered a goodwill, ill will thing again? So in all these cases, I think I need to ask the question, deep inside, what is going on in my heart? What makes me make such a thing, which at the end, if you look at it from outside, as the author is saying, that is a betrayal to the religion. I am betraying the religion. So what is really the underlying feeling in me? Even when I say that, oh, I am doing it in pure good intentions. So what is that pure good intention in there? Can it be, again, this, as others also said, I cannot, or anybody cannot pinpoint anybody with finger and saying that, oh, this is what you're going through in your heart. But in my heart, can it be that I am looking for some sort of a self-gratification rather than, or in order not to take, let's say, taking local imam as a teacher to whom I will direct my question to is hurting me, for example? Just posing the question.
Thank you, Brother Sohail.
I know we're out of time, so try to keep it short, but there's a lot of things I could say or want to say, but just to briefly say, it's interesting to me that a lot of these like issues that people are grappling with today that have become sort of topic of conversation have like fundamentally appeared maybe in the last 100 years. And I think that correlates, quite well with the de-emphasis in Islamic or Muslim scholarship on belief or belief-related matters, or trying to understand the Quran and what is the Quran trying to say to me or speak to me, and instead the emphasis, especially post colonization, on rules and regulations. And as a result, I think Yusuf brought this up, and which is why I have an issue, is that people like in like you go to the masjid and people organize not necessarily around belief. It's a presumption. There's a presumption made about what I believe in. No one actually, even though people may have doubts or questions or concerns, no one actually addresses that fundamentally because there's a presumption. So like the organizing principle of a masjid fundamentally is not around that. It's around people who have a certain view about, these outward manifestation of Islam, the do's and the don'ts, rather than the organizing principle being about what I believe in. And therefore, as a result of that, then this is how I could, see myself in this world. This is how I conduct myself in the world. It's backwards. It's like the cart before the horse. And by doing that, then people become insular. They say, okay, well, this is what society says, and this is what I do. And so as a community, we're going to insulate, rather than like what Birkan was saying, being comfortable with what's happening in society, but understanding how you see the world. Like how do I see the world, and am I content with that? And that to me is the issue, because there is no emphasis on that. And I think that is what becomes problematic. And then in terms of trying to make your own personal ijtihad, because as Yusuf was saying, you may not realize it becomes self-gratification. Whereas if one were to have like a sound foundation about belief or the essential matters of the religion, then they would understand, as like great mujtahids have done in the past, that they're not trying to, understand how to conduct themselves in this world based off what they want necessarily, but trying to understand necessarily what does God want? What is the will of God in this world? What does he desire of man? And not simply to like overlord or punish or to control man's life per se, but that relationship or the way in which one conducts oneself becomes a means of having a relationship with his God, a more sort of fruitful relationship. But that's not really what sort of the understanding is, or the lens through which people perceive these things. People think, I mean, myself included, thought these things also in the past, is that there's no frame of reference in that regard. It's just that, okay, well, does it really have to be this way? Does really God, why would God want to have things this way, or, have to, set up all these regulations in this way or another way? Why does he care? And, just like that line of questioning. And it's because the thinking is backwards. My understanding of what it means to believe is backwards, or is unfounded, maybe, quite possibly. So it's as if, it's like people say to tear the building down and build it back up. I don't know if there's really even a building. Things have to be rebuilt from the ground up. And that's what the Prophet did when he came into Meccan society. There was no building there. He had to reconstruct people's worldview, their deen. And based off of that, that's how they became the companions.
Jazakallah khair. So we do have another comment in the chat box. It says, was the question, my brother Yusuf, how do we differentiate between questioning out of ill will and questioning out of reaction to imposition of religion? I would say let's keep note of this question. I will keep note of it at the very least, because we are out of time. But I think this was a fruitful discussion, and I think there is obviously a lot more to discuss, clearly. Inshallah, we can continue from the third obstacle that Nursi is drawing out for us next week. But Jazakallah khair for all of your contributions and all of your comments, and it made it all the more helpful for me. So inshallah, let's end here. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Wa akhiru wa dana walhamdulillah.